everybody. Welcome back to John's Fantasy Football Show. That's John. I'm Jared. I'm the host for today, and we have a lot to unpack today in the fantasy football world. We have a buy low, sell high segment, some fantasy strategies, and the week 4 predictions as always. So we're not going to waste any of your time. Let's get right into the first segment, John. Buy low, sell high. So we're going to start with the sell high options. There's Deebo Samuel, Mike Williams, and Rob Gronkowski. Let's start with Mr. Deebo Samuel. He's had really great games the past 3 games. I personally have him in our fantasy league. He's doing very well. What do you think? Buy low, sell, or should I say sell high or keep him?
I think for Deebo Samuel, I think you should sell him high. And the reason I say this, he had 31.9 fantasy points in week 1, 16.1 in week 2, and then 10.2 in week 3. So he's regressing. Brandon Ayuk is having a larger role in this offense. Kittle, we saw only get 4 catches each week 1 and week 2, and then week 3 he had more catches. So you're seeing, other players come out into this offense. So I think to expect wide receiver 1 numbers from Deebo is pretty, unrealistic. He is the wide receiver 1 for now, but remember last season he got injured and Ayuk was the number 1 for the majority of the second half of the season. So as far as Deebo, I would try to trade him now. This is the part of the season everybody's DMing me on Instagram asking me, who should I trade? Who should I keep? Should I do this trade? Should I reject this trade? What should I counter? I think for Deebo, you should start to look for other options. And I'll talk about that in a few minutes, who you can look for. But as far as Deebo, I think his role is decreasing. I don't think he's going to get below, 10 fantasy points. And this week, I would probably keep him for this week because Kittle is limited in practice and it's no guarantee that he's going to play. So if he doesn't play, then against the Seahawks, I think Deebo will probably have somewhere between 13 and 18 fantasy points. So maybe after this week, then it'll be time to sell Deebo. Maybe just honestly just shop around. He has pretty good value right now. So one guy you might want to get for him, a Calvin Ridley or something like that.
Yeah, and you see Ayuk is back in the lineup again.
Right. Yeah, they actually targeted him a few times this past week. So
Yeah.
that's good.
Our next guy, Mike Williams, huge game in the win over the Chiefs. He had 33 points. Crazy. More than Keenan Allen. He's actually probably doing better than Keenan Allen, surprisingly.
Yeah.
So is it sell high with Mike Williams?
I don't think you sell high with Mike Williams. I think you keep him on the high because you're going to have a lot of people that want him from you. And honestly, if you get a really good deal, then you could take it. But you can't really trade Mike Williams right now. He's doing better than Keenan Allen, which is, nobody would think because Keenan Allen's usually the number 1 for Herbert. But we saw last season Mike Williams was hurt. He was on and off the field and it was the Keenan Allen show. But Mike Williams has never played a full season. And so far, we're seeing it. Now, obviously, since he's never played a full season, it's tough to be like, oh, yeah, you should trade him because he's going to get hurt. But it's really tough to predict an injury. So he's playing so well that you don't really want to trade him yet. And he seems like he's Herbert's favorite target right now. They're not really throwing to Jared Cook that much. Eckler out of the backfield isn't getting as many targets as he was last year. So and none of the receivers that they drafted or their young receivers like Guyton and Josh Palmer, none of them are really getting a lot of targets. So as far as Mike Williams, if you have him on your team, you're starting him every week until you see that he doesn't perform. But every week he's been one of the top wide receivers. And last week he was the number 1 receiver in fantasy. So definitely keep him in all your lineups, start him every week, and don't trade him unless you get a really good deal.
All right. I actually picked up Mike Williams. I think it's in our league, I
Oh,
believe.
nice.
Yeah, yeah. Um, let's talk about Rob Gronkowski. So he had 2 huge games, and then against the Rams, against some good competition, only had 9.5 points. So, he gets targeted a lot in the red zone. He has a crap ton of touchdowns.
Yeah.
So definitely touchdown dependent. Do you think sell high with Gronk if 9.5 is high end?
Yeah. I mean, 9.5 wasn't that high, but remember he did leave with that injury, so he probably would have had more than 9.5 points.
Mhm.
So I would consider Gronk a sell high, option because he did have 29 points in week one, 19.9 in week two touchdowns in each of those games. So honestly, I think it's time to start shopping Gronk. If you have Gronk on your team, it's likely that he's not your only tight end. I know a lot of people have Gronk and somebody like Mark Andrews or somebody like Noah Fant or Logan Thomas. I would be fine with you trading away Gronk and keeping Fant as your number one, tight end, or Logan Thomas, because they're getting decent amount of targets. And especially with Hamler and Judy out, Bridgewater is going to have to start throwing to Fant, and they haven't really trailed in any games. So now that they're playing the Ravens this week, they're probably not going to be playing from ahead. It's probably going to be either even or they'll be down. So they're going to have to throw it more. And it's really Cortland Sutton, Tim Patrick, or Noah Fant. So if you have Fant and you have Gronk, I would be happy with you trading Gronk for somebody, maybe a flex option if you need a RB2, or if you need a wide receiver 2 or a flex. You can get a solid player for someone like Gronk. If you see a team in your league that needs a tight end, I would be fine with you going to them and being like, all right, you got a running back 2, an RB2 that I really need. I'll give you Kittle for him, or I'll give you Gronk for him. Gronk is a perfect opportunity because last week, Antonio Brown was out due to COVID. He's coming back. And we know the Buccaneers, they have so many options of who to throw to. So it's tough to predict that Gronk is going to be one of the top tight ends this season. So you might want to start, just shop around for him. I would be fine with you getting rid of him and keeping somebody like Mark Andrews or Noah Fant as your number one tight end.
All right. Yeah, we know Brady likes to spread the ball out to everybody. So it's like, one half of the season he may favor Gronk, the other half he might favor Godwin, the other half is
Right.
Evans. It's
Honestly, it's game by game too. Like, one game he'll be like, I just want to go to Gronk. And then the next game he's like, I just want to go to Evans. That's it. It's like, you don't know.
Yeah. Let's go to buy low. So these are players that could potentially be trade targets for fantasy football owners. The first one, it's crazy. Calvin Ridley. He was projected to have such a great season, and he hasn't broken 20 points in the 3 weeks that he's played. And usually people are drafting him for their wide receiver 1.
Right. Especially last year. Even last year, people were having him as their wide receiver 1, and Julio was there. I know he was in and out of the lineup, but Matt Ryan was targeting, Calvin Ridley a lot. And he even is this year. And that's the reason why I think he's a buy low opportunity, because he's somebody who had 10 points in week 1, 19.3 in week 2, and then 14.1 against the Giants. And I think this week against Washington, we saw what Josh Allen did to them last week. I think this is a get right game for Ridley. I think he's going to have his first 20-point game of the season. And if you can get him, if you could trade for him before tomorrow's game against Washington, then that'd be great, because once he has that big game against Washington, his best game of the season probably going to be tomorrow, then the team that has him probably isn't going to want to trade him. They're going to be like, oh, okay, so now I know I could keep Ridley. So giving somebody for like Deebo Samuel for Calvin Ridley, I would be fine with you doing that, because I think going forward, I know Deebo's had more fantasy points, but if you could do that, if you could find somebody in your league that has Ridley, I would be very happy if you traded Deebo Samuel for Calvin Ridley, because obviously Ridley's going to have more opportunities than Deebo the rest of the season.
So, John, I'll offer you Deebo for Ridley.
I knew that was coming. I do have Ridley on my team, and I've started him every week, but I think this is the week he's going to have more than 20 points. So if he does bad this week, then maybe I'll come back to you, but I like Ridley the rest of the year.
And you can afford some wide receiver issues. You have Kupp, Thielen, freaking Chase.
I have CeeDee Lamb.
Yeah, I mean, come on. You're hoarding them all.
I know. I mean, I would give one of them up, but who's your tight end? You have
Mark Andrews.
Well, who would you have if I gave you like a Thielen or Jamar Chase for, Andrews? Who's your backup tight end?
I don't know.
Because I have Fant right now. I'm pretty happy with Fant now that those Broncos receivers are hurting.
I have Logan Thomas.
Okay. I mean, he had a touchdown last week, so he's pretty solid, but I don't know. I might try to go to Caleb, give him one of my receivers for Kittle, because Kittle he's been hurt. He hasn't been targeted that much, and he might not play this week because he was downgraded in practice yesterday. So
All right, yeah, we'll see. We'll see. We'll be in touch. We'll be in touch. Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor has not hit his projected points at all this season. His best game was at Seattle week 1, had 17 points, but 6 the next week, 8 the next week. What the heck is going on with Jonathan Taylor? Do you think you set or you buy low with Jonathan Taylor with that loaded backfield that they have with Nyheim Hines and Marlon Mack?
I think you hit the nail on the head on that one. I don't think you buy low on Jonathan Taylor. Everybody drafted him probably first round or early second round in their draft. And honestly, I'd rather have DeAndre Swift the rest of the season than Jonathan Taylor. If you have Jonathan Taylor, try to trade him for DeAndre Swift because Swift is getting catches out of the backfield while Taylor isn't. It's obviously Nyheim Hines that they want to give the ball to out of the backfield. I talked about it on the podcast a few weeks ago that Nyheim Hines just got paid top 10 RB money. That means they're going to want to get him the ball. Marlon Mack is now back from injury, so he's going to get a couple carries during the game. Not to mention the fact that they're running the ball much less than they were last year because Carson Wentz loves to throw the ball. So when he's going into that QB room and they're coming up with the game plan for that week, he's going to want to throw the ball a lot. So coupled with all those factors, you're not running the ball as much. You're not getting catches out of the backfield, so that diminishes your value by far in a PPR league. Plus, you're ceding a couple carries to Hines and Mack in the backfield. I mean, Taylor is becoming a touchdown-dependent running back, which is really unfortunate for somebody you probably drafted in your first or second round. So don't try to trade for Jonathan Taylor. And if you have him on your team, I would try to trade him for somebody like DeAndre Swift or somebody like that because it's just a tough situation there.
Yeah, that's gonna be hard to pry away Swift from anybody. He's having such a great year.
Yeah.
Our last guy, I personally have him, Allen Robinson. Oh man, I mean, the quarterback's got to be the focal point here, John. Do you try and buy low on Allen Robinson and kind of in complementary, you buy low on Justin Fields as well, because Justin Fields got to play way better, and the O-line's got to play way better for Allen Robinson to play better. So buy low on Allen Robinson / Justin Fields.
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head on that one again, because it's the quarterback situation that you're betting on here. We saw Dalton go down a couple of weeks ago. Fields comes in. And to be honest, last week, Fields looked really bad. Allen Robinson, I think, had less than 10 fantasy points, or he had 4.7 last week and only 10 against Cincinnati the week before. And then the week before that, he only had 9.5 against the Rams. And I know he was shadowed by Ramsey, but still, you're betting on that quarterback situation. But if I didn't have Allen Robinson, I would try to trade for him right now. I think he's a perfect example of a buy low candidate. And the reason is because Matt Nagy just came out this week and he said, Andy Dalton is the starter when he's healthy again. And guess what? Dalton practiced this week. He might start Sunday. Honestly, Nick Foles could possibly start for the Bears Sunday. We don't know who it's going to be. My bet is that it's not going to be Justin Fields because of how he played. You could just tell he's not ready for the NFL yet. I think it's going to be Dalton, but even if it's Nick Foles, that's an upgrade for Allen Robinson. Either Dalton or Foles, that would be great for Robinson. So I think Robinson has a good week this week. I think you should try to trade him before tomorrow's game because I think he's going to have his best game of the season. I think he's going to have over 15 fantasy points, probably over 20 fantasy points against Detroit, who we know their secondary is not good, but it's a perfect situation for Robinson. Another thing I want to point out is that it came out this week that Matt Nagy could give the play calling duties to their offensive coordinator, Bill Lazor, which, Nagy has been calling the plays up until now. And actually they made this exact move last season when Nagy was calling plays. He handed over the duties to Bill Lazor. And I think the last 8 games of the season, the first 8 games of the season, their points per game was around 17 points. And then with Lazor calling the plays, it was around 25 points. So now they start this season with Nagy calling plays. Obviously hasn't gone well. The injury to Dalton doesn't help. But I think with this change possibly coming, or them changing up the playbook and Dalton coming back, I think this is a perfect opportunity for you guys to go trade for Allen Robinson. Like I said, Deebo Samuel for Ridley. If you want to give up, a Chris Godwin or a Deebo Samuel for Allen Robinson, I would be happy with that. I would definitely do that. So if you have Allen Robinson, keep him, give him one more chance, start him this week and see how he does. But it's a perfect opportunity to buy low on Allen Robinson.
We're going to move on to some fantasy strategies. Now, these are strategies that you can implement into your fantasy team today that John personally uses. So, John, tell us some of your fantasy picks for this, or fantasy strategies for this week.
So, one strategy that I'm using this time of the season, and I mentioned it last week, but I wanted to touch on it again. It's picking up guys that are going to have great games the next week. So, we're sitting here, it's Saturday, right before the Sunday games. Now, if you need to take a look at your lineup for a week ahead. If you have a guy, I don't know if the buys are starting in week 5, but if you have a guy that has a buy in week 5, you might want to pick up a guy that's a free agent that has a good matchup the next week. And this is typical for streaming defenses. If you want to pick up a defense that has a great game next week. So for example, this week, the Tennessee Titans are playing the New York Jets. So obviously, whoever saw that during the week probably wavered for the Tennessee Titans and got them on their team, and they're going to start them. And obviously, you want the defense that plays the Jets. Well, guess who's playing the Jets next week? It's the Atlanta Falcons. And most likely nobody has the Falcons defense on their team. They're most likely available in your league because they're such a bad defense. But against the Jets, their floor is very high. They're probably going to get at least 8 to 10 fantasy points, and that's their floor. Their ceiling is closer to 20 points. So I would project them somewhere around 12 to 14 fantasy points next week. And if you have a spot on your roster, if you have a bench guy that you're not really using, like Marquez Callaway or Mecole Hardman, like I mentioned last week as well, you might want to drop one of them and just pick up the Atlanta defense so that when Atlanta, on Tuesday night or Tuesday, everybody in your league is going to be looking at the waivers and being like, oh my gosh, the Falcons are playing the Jets. Let me waiver for the Falcons defense. And then they'll look at your team and be like, oh, wow, he thought a week ahead and picked up the Falcons defense. That was a very smart move. So if you have that extra spot, look at those defenses for the next week so you don't have to waste your waiver or worry about somebody else wavering for them in the middle of the week. Another strategy, I've talked about it in the previous segment, but this is trade time. It's time we're learning things about teams. We're learning about who's getting targeted on teams, how they're using players. It's time to trade. So some of the trade targets I already mentioned, trading somebody like a Chris Godwin or Deebo Samuel for somebody like Allen Robinson or Calvin Ridley, I would be fine with either of those trades. Trading Gronk for somebody like George Kittle. Obviously, I would wait until after this week because Kittle, it doesn't seem like he's going to play, and even if he does, he might be limited. But if Kittle comes back to full health, you might want to trade Gronk for somebody like Kittle because I think Kittle's going to have a better rest of the year. Gronk seems touchdown dependent. Somebody like Deebo Samuel for also a Jamar Chase. I think Jamar Chase is probably going to have a better rest of the year than Deebo Samuel. We saw him the other night on Thursday. He didn't get a touchdown against the Jaguars, but he's been playing really well, and it's clear that Burrow loves throwing to him. And also giving somebody like Ruggs or Jalen Waddle for somebody like Robbie Anderson. And you might be thinking, Robbie Anderson, Darnold doesn't even look at him. Well, I'm going to talk about Anderson in a few minutes, but this is the time of the year to start thinking about trades. Shop around, see if you can get an Allen Robinson, a Calvin Ridley, shop around and see who on your team everybody else likes. Another strategy is don't buy too high. A lot of you messaging me on Instagram being like, Aaron Jones just had a huge game. I want him really bad. I just want him on my team. Like Cooper Kupp is doing so well. Like what can I give up for him? Don't give up too much. I usually caution people on that because Cooper Kupp, his stock can't be any higher than it is right now. And Aaron Jones, you shouldn't have waited until after he had a 40-point game for you to trade for him, because now the guy that has him is going to be like, okay, you got to give me like DK Metcalf and like a Chris Carson, which you should not do that, So be careful about giving up too much. If you need any advice on that, feel free to DM me on Instagram. But I would just say, don't give up too much for these high players. If you really want Cooper Kupp on your team that bad, maybe wait a week or two for him to not have a huge game. Maybe wait until he has like under 20 fantasy points and then maybe trade for him, And then the last strategy is be active in free agency, which I mentioned last week, but this is the time of the year where injuries are going to happen. We saw KJ Hamler, Jerry Jeudy. get injured, and who was one of the top pickups? Tim Patrick. So if you're in a 12-team league, Tim Patrick is probably rostered this week, but keep an eye on those injuries because fantasy is all about injuries and matchups. So definitely pick up Tim Patrick if nobody has him, but keep your eyes open for that. Peyton Barber had 23 carries last week, and Josh Jacobs might not come back this week. So if he doesn't play, Barber, John Gruden came out this week and said, I would not hesitate at all. If Josh Jacobs doesn't play, I would not hesitate at all to give Peyton Barber the starting role, like primary back role, like every carry. So Peyton Barber is somebody that needs to be rostered in your leagues. If you're in a 12-team league, definitely. If you're in a 10-team league, I would even bench him. Because this week, if Jacobs doesn't play, I'm going to start him in my RB2 spot in my 12-team league. And also somebody like J.D. McKissick. We saw him get more involved 2 weeks ago when he had that goal line carry and a few catches. And Antonio Gibson practiced limited Wednesday and downgraded to did not practice on Thursday. So if he doesn't play against the Falcons this week, McKissick would be a great streaming option. So just keep in tune to the injuries and keep guys on your bench that are backups to guys that are injured, or wide receivers that just got injured, or running backs that are banged up.
Yeah. I saw your TikTok about Chuba Hubbard putting a waiver in for Chuba Hubbard.
Yeah.
And if you're not following, it's at Dorm Debate Podcast on TikTok. And I saw a comment, and some kid's like, "Oh, I bought in on Chuba Hubbard like 2 weeks ago because I thought, I anticipated that, Christian McCaffrey, a very injury prone, that another injury would come up this season and Chuba Hubbard would get that starting role."
Right.
Already thinking like 2-3 weeks ahead, like you're saying with your strategies, just kind of thinking a week ahead and being ahead of all the waiver wires and stuff like that. So yeah, good on. I don't know who it was, but good on you, man, for picking up Chuba Hubbard.
Yeah, I forget who it was, but another guy like Dalvin Cook, we always see there's always one game. If you follow fantasy the last couple of years, you'd know this. Like, there's always one game in the season that Dalvin Cook, at least one game, probably like two, that Dalvin Cook doesn't play, and the backup Alexander Madison has a great game. So, like, he's a guy that you definitely want on your team. Just stash on the bench. Last week, I picked him up in my 12-team league, and he ended up starting for Dalvin Cook, and he had over 20 fantasy points. So he's a guy that, like, every year he gets at least one 20-point, over 20-point game. And if Cook misses a couple weeks, that's perfect for Madison. So just keep in tune, like you said, to guys that might get injured, and pick up their backups. And, it could pay off.
Our next topic, week 4 predictions. So we have a lot of subcategories of the week 4 predictions. Games to love, games to hate, impact injuries, one of John's weekly picks, and one of John's weekly sits. Let's start, John, with games to love. Which games do you love this week?
So games that I love are games that if you have players on these teams in fantasy football, you're going to want to get them in your lineup. So this week, the Chiefs game, again, I said the Chiefs and Chargers last week and ended up paying off. You want to start everybody in this game, the Chiefs versus the Eagles. If you have Tyreek Hill, a lot of people are worried about Tyreek Hill. Big week 1, not good week 2 or week 3, but don't worry about him. I wouldn't expect him to get, I don't think this is going to be one of the weeks that he goes off. And the reason is because he's not going to get any deep catches because the Eagles play 2 deep safeties and they don't let anything over the top. So I think the Chiefs are going to realize that it's going to be a lot of Kelsey. It's going to be a lot of Hill on crossing routes and stop routes. So I think obviously you're starting Hill if you have him, Kelsey, Mahomes. Edwards-Helaire finally had his best game of the season last week, so start him. You're probably starting him if you have him. And then Eagles, obviously Hurts if you have him, you're probably starting him. Devonta Smith didn't have a great game last week, but you're probably starting him. And then Miles Sanders is very tough. Ask me in my live on Sunday or DM me on Instagram if you should start him over somebody else. But Devonta Smith, Dallas Goedert, you're probably going to start them as well. So that's a game that I love. Another game I love is the Seahawks and 49ers. Talked about it a little before, but I think this is going to be a higher scoring game, high 20s, maybe even 30s. Russell Wilson, if you have him, start him. DK Metcalf, definitely start him. Tyler Lockett, you're going to start him if he's healthy. He did practice limited Wednesday, but Thursday he did not practice at all. So that's a little concerning. keep an eye on that. If he doesn't play, DK is going to have a huge game. Chris Carson, you're going to start. And then Debo, you're probably going to start because he's been doing so well. Ayuk, I don't know if I would start him yet, but if Kittle doesn't play, then Ayuk's a decent flex option. And then the 49ers running backs, you're going to have to keep an eye on that. I would probably stay away from that because even if Elijah Mitchell does play, they used check a lot. Trey Sermon had a touchdown. Mitchell's still banged up, so it's a tough situation back there. I probably wouldn't play any of them. But if you have Debo, Kittle, Ayuk, you're probably going to try to get them into your flex at least this week.
All right, those are games to love. How about your games that you hate this week?
So games that I hate, a couple games that if you have guys on these teams, you probably shouldn't start them. The first one is the Saints versus the Giants. The Giants had Sterling Shepard and Darius Slayton miss practice this week. They're most likely not going to play tomorrow on Sunday against the Saints. So that leaves Galladay and Evan Engram as the only two guys for Daniel Jones to throw to. I mean, I have Saquon in my 12-team league, and right now he's in my starting lineup. But I don't have Peyton Barber in that league, but if I did, I would keep an eye on him because if Josh Jacobs is ruled out before Saquon plays, I would rather play Peyton Barber against the Chargers. Or I also have Sony Michel on my bench in that league. If Darrell Henderson doesn't play, I'm going to start Sony Michel over Saquon because we saw last week, I said my must sit was Damian Harris, and he played the Saints and got 3.1 fantasy points. So I know Saquon's much better than Damian Harris, but we know the Saints front seven is just amazing. This is going to be a low scoring game, and Saquon's value is going to have to come off of those long runs or maybe a screen pass that he takes long or maybe a touchdown. This week, he's touchdown or big play dependent, so I wouldn't bet on that. But if you're the only guy I would definitely start in this game is Kamara. Other than that, the only other guy is Saquon, and I really would try not to start him if I had another option. So that's a game that I hate. Another game that I hate is the Ravens and Broncos. A little controversy on our podcast this week talking about that game and who's going to win it. But I think it's going to be low scoring in Denver. We saw the Ravens, they might get Rashad Bateman, their first round pick or second round pick. I forget which one it was, but they might get him back this week. I think the Broncos opponents are all 0-9 so far. So I think this is going to be a low scoring game. Both defenses are good and both offenses haven't struggled too much so far, but I think they might struggle this week. So honestly, if you have Lamar, you're probably starting him. If you have Fant, you're starting him. Sutton and Tim Patrick are decent flex options. Mark Andrews, you're probably going to start. Marquise Brown, I would be careful about, but that's a game that I think is going to be low scoring, and it's risky to start any of your players if you have them.
As far as the Giants game, maybe Kadarius Toney sighting?
Yeah, I did hear that they want to get him more involved, and especially with those two injuries to wide receivers, he could get 5 to 10 targets.
Yeah, I predicted that after that Slayton drop that they're going to start putting Toney in that role.
Mm-hmm.
But who knows with the Giants? They've barely used him at all in
I
3
know.
games.
I mean, come on, get him, like, put him on a jet sweep or something. Isn't he fast? Like,
Yeah, the problem is now when you actually need him, he's had what, like 10 reps
yeah,
in real
exactly.
in real games, so he's not even gonna be like that ready.
Right.
So I don't know. So in our 6-man, I have Kamara and Barkley. 6-man league, whatever. I have Barkley on the bench.
Who do you have in place?
I have
Do you have Najee in there?
yes, correct.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, that's Najee Harris is definitely, if you have him, you're starting him this week because he got over
So
10
many,
dude,
so many.
he got over 10 catches last week, and that was because Deontay Johnson was out and Juju was injured. And guess what? They're both injured again this week, and they're playing the Packers, who don't have a good run defense and are going to score points. So it's just set up perfectly for Najee to have a big game this week.
Yeah, I could, but I am thinking about putting Barkley in just in case. But like you
In the
said,
flex,
yeah, but it's gonna be low. Like you said, it's gonna be low scoring. Giants
right?
games are always low scoring, and the Saints have been low scoring. So
I mean, if it comes out that Dalton or Foles is going to play, I'd rather Allen Robinson than Saquon in your flex. You know,
yeah, or Debo.
Yeah, or even Debo it because Kittle might not play, or if he does, he's not going to get a lot of targets. So yeah, I'd rather Debo than Saquon.
Yeah. Let's talk about some impact injuries. Are there any injuries that you're on the watch for besides, McCaffrey?
So other than McCaffrey, one thing I do want to mention, we didn't talk about the Thursday night game, but we saw DJ Chark got injured and Laviska Shenault has not had a great season so far. Everybody thought, preseason he looked really good, but Chark went down and we saw Shenault get put into that DJ Chark role. He had that 40 or 50-yard reception, which was great because all up to this point, we've seen Shenault get targeted near the line of scrimmage. So to see him go on a deep ball is great. So if he probably got dropped in one of your leagues, so if he got dropped, pick him up. He might be a solid flex option or a trade, trade option moving forward. But if he is not rostered in your league and you're in a 12-team league, 14, 10-team league, pick him up because he could have some value moving forward with the Jags being from behind. Obviously, I've talked a lot about the Bears. If Dalton or Foles plays, that's an upgrade for David Montgomery and Allen Robinson. Josh Jacobs, I talked about. It's tough that he's playing on Monday and Peyton Barber also. But if it's ruled that Jacobs is out before the Sunday games, I would rather have Peyton Barber than Saquon this week, just to give you an idea of how high I am on Peyton Barber. I think if he gets the primary role and Jacobs doesn't play, I think he's going to have over 15, probably closer to 20, 22 fantasy points this week. Another thing everybody's talking about, A.J. Brown is injured and Julio Jones is injured. So you might be thinking, well, wait, who are the Titans going to throw to then? Well, guess what? They're playing the Jets this week, so they're not going to have to throw it a lot. I think Derrick Henry is going to get 30 carries this week. He's just going to go off this week. They're going to give it to him almost every play. And if you're thinking, should I sit Tannehill? I would probably sit Tannehill this week. I don't really like Lamar, but I like Lamar more than Tannehill. I would start a bunch of guys over Tannehill this week because he has to go to Westbrook-Ikhine or Chester Rogers, who they're obviously good. They're in the NFL, so they're good players, but it's the Jets. So I think they're just going to run the ball. Their defense is going to play well. And as far as Julio and A.J. Brown, you just got to take it up to game time if you're going to start them or not. But if either of them play, you're probably going to try to find them into your lineup because they're playing the Jets. Another injury, Gibson. I talked about McKissick. Gibson didn't practice Thursday. Limited Wednesday, didn't practice Thursday. That's the same for Tyler Lockett. Limited Wednesday, didn't practice Thursday. So keep an eye on them. If they don't play, McKissick upgrade and Metcalf upgrade. But if they do play, you're probably going to want to start them because they're probably going to be in higher scoring games.
A lot of injuries, man.
A lot of injuries this time of year.
And I faced Derrick Henry, so.
Oh, shoot. Wait, who are you facing this week? Who has him?
Abood.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Well, I mean, you do have Najee. Najee could probably offset it a little bit, but I'd be shocked if Henry didn't get 150 yards and a touchdown.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking 40. Like,
I
had Henry last year, and he put up 40, over 40 twice, I think. So,
right.
And especially with these two wide receivers out, it's ridiculous. Let's go to what everyone's been waiting for, your weekly pick. Now, this is one of 3 weekly picks that you have. Give us the weekly pick for week 4.
So my weekly pick, actually, I'm going to be nice to you guys because usually I don't know my weekly picks until Sunday because a lot of it depends on injuries and matchups. And we usually don't know the injuries until 11:30 a.m. on Sunday. So 30 minutes before I go live on TikTok. So usually I don't know my weekly picks until Saturday night or Sunday morning. But it turns out that I actually know 2 of my weekly picks already. The third one I have not set I haven't set yet because I still am waiting for injury reports and things like that. But I'm going to give you my 2 weekly picks, 2 of my 3 weekly picks.
2 of them.
I will.
Wow.
So the first of my weekly picks is a guy that I really don't mention a lot, but his name is Kareem Hunt. And if you guys don't have him on your team, try to pick him up because he's a stud. Second of all, we saw Jarvis Landry go down. He's on IR. And we saw last week against the Bears, the Browns obviously took a run-heavy approach. Chubb had 22 carries. Hunt had 10 carries. And Chubb had 86 yards on 22 carries, and Hunt had 81 yards on 10 carries. So he ran much better than Chubb. So it might be more of an even split this week against the Vikings. But the most important thing is against the Bears, the Browns didn't have to score a lot of points, right? But Hunt still had 7 targets. Odell, I think, had 9 targets. He led the team. Hunt had 7. And the next highest was Donovan Peoples-Jones with 2 targets. So it's obvious that Hunt is part of the passing game. And that was a game that they don't need to even throw the ball a lot because it's the Bears. So imagine now they're playing the Vikings. The Vikings know how to put up points. So if they're going to have to run the ball and throw the ball more, and Hunt was second on the team in targets, that's amazing for a PPR league because he had 6 catches for like 70 yards. That's already 13 points right there. That's not including what rushing he's going to get, which he got 80 yards and a touchdown. So he had like 24, 25 fantasy points last week. I think he's going to be around that again this week, 20 to 25 fantasy points, because they're playing the Vikings. They're going to need to put up points and they're going to need to throw it. And Chubb does not get targeted out of the backfield. It's always Hunt. So within a PPR league, it's just set up perfectly for Hunt. So put Hunt in all your lineups. If you want to ask me who you should start instead of Hunt, or if you have a decision to make, DM me on Instagram or join my live on TikTok on Sunday at 12 noon Eastern time. And I'll reveal my 3rd weekly pick, which I, to be honest, don't even know yet. But my 2nd weekly pick, and a lot of you are going to give me a lot of heat for this one, and you're probably going to hate me for it. But my 2nd weekly pick is Robbie Anderson.
No, not again. Again?
Yeah, I think okay, I'm taking a risk with Robbie Anderson, but hear me out on this one. I have a couple reasons for it. The Panthers, obviously Christian McCaffrey got hurt, so Chuba Hubbard is now in the lineup. What that means is they're going to have to rely on Sam Darnold's arm a little bit more. So that might mean, maybe 8 to 10 more throw attempts for Darnold a game. Okay, so that's 10 more targets that need to be had. Not only that, but the Cowboys score a lot of points. The Panthers haven't played teams that have had to score a lot of points. They played the Saints, the Jets, and they played the Texans. So none of those 3 teams score the ball a lot. So obviously the Panthers defense looks pretty good right now. So they haven't really had to throw the ball. So if the Cowboys score points, Carolina is going to be, I think they're the only team that hasn't trailed so far, if I'm not mistaken. So they're also going to have to throw the ball. They're not used to being behind. So they're going to have to throw the ball. And not only that they don't have McCaffrey, so you're going to have to rely on Darnold more, but they're going to be probably trailing. So they're going to have to throw it even more. Not only that, but DJ Moore, their top targeted player, is going to be shadowed by Trevon Diggs. He has 3 catches this season, 1 in each game. And they're all interceptions, obviously. But I think with DJ Moore covered by Trevon Diggs is playing lights out. He's one of the top 5 corners in the sophomore year. He's playing really well. Not only that, but this week they had 10 days off because they played last Thursday. So they have more time to watch Dallas and game plan. And Matt Rule came out this week and said, Robbie Anderson needs to be more involved in this offense. Like, we only got him 1 catch that week against the Jets. It was a long touchdown, but we can't only target him deep. We have to be targeting him more because he's too good not to be involved in this offense. And that's exactly what you want to hear with Trevon Diggs covering DJ Moore, McCaffrey out, and a game script that's going to favor the passing game. It's just set up for Anderson to have a bounce back game. I think Anderson's going to have his best game of the season. Now, obviously, it's going to be very hard to start him in one of your wide receiver spots because he's been doing so bad, but I would try to find a way to get him into your flex. Ask me on Instagram or join my TikTok to ask me who you should start over him. But I think if there's ever a game for Anderson to break out, it's this game. And if he doesn't, then I don't know what to tell you. Just drop him or trade him for anything you can, because if he can't do it this week against the Cowboys, he's not going to be able to do it all season.
Yeah, we know the rule is that if you pick the guy twice and he muffs it both times, he's never getting picked again.
He's never getting mentioned again either.
There's a couple guys on that list. AJ Green.
AJ Green's one of them.
James White.
James
Probably
White.
Guys.
I'll never say those names again.
Yeah, they just screwed up. Like, they missed their opportunity.
That's their fault at that point.
Yeah, you gave them a chance. You liked it. They didn't perform.
Yeah.
Okay. Are you given one weekly sit or two?
Yeah, I'm given one weekly must sit.
Okay.
Obviously, my other two must sits will come out on Sunday during my TikTok live. And throughout this podcast, the one we're recording right now, you probably have heard some guys that I like or don't like for this week. But one of my must sits, a guy that if you have him, you're not considering starting him at all. I'd rather start almost anybody else over him. And funny enough, it's the same guy I said last week on this podcast. It's Damian Harris again. And unfortunately for Damian Harris owners, he faced the Saints last week, which were, I think, the number 2 run defense, and he faces the number 1 run defense this week in the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So everybody knows that the way to beat the Buccaneers is to throw the ball. So I like Jacoby Myers if you can get him into your lineup. Kendrick Bourne had a good week last week. I probably wouldn't start him, but him and Aguilar are decent bench stashes. But Jacoby Myers, I would probably start in flex. But Damian Harris, he's going to get below 10 fantasy points again. I'm sorry, fantasy owners, but please don't start him in your fantasy lineups this week because he's going to have another bad week.
Poor Damian Harris. Man, he had that really great run like 2
Yeah,
weeks ago.
that's his highlight.
That's the season highlights.
That's it.
That's as good as it's gonna get for him.
Yeah.
He looked at his lineup and he's freaking got the Buccaneers and all these great rushing defenses.
He's probably listening to this and he's like, Sean says I'm not going to do good. Maybe I shouldn't even play.
He's like, dang, man. Darn
Dang,
it.
I thought I felt good in practice this week, but I guess
It's like when you guess things in fantasy and you're like, yeah, I don't like Robbie Anderson. And Jonathan or someone's like, darn it. I was gonna start him, like as if he's already put up like a 0.
Yeah, no, he's already guaranteed like none. So, oh dang it, I already put him in.
That's funny. All right, well that does it. If you don't have anything else, that wraps up the second episode of John's Fantasy Football Show. Thank you guys for tuning in, and if you made it this far, leave a like, comment down below. I know last week I said that we would do a Q&A. We will do one eventually. Until then, thank you guys so much for watching, and we will see you guys in the next one.